It's space weather! But first, indoor tomato update. We now have 3 tomatoes. This one's growing, it's about pool ball size now. And also, there's the second. And there's a third right there. Oh yeah. A little bit of indoor tomatoes just grown as a plant of opportunity. Started growing outside in November before the first frost. Brought them inside. It's looking at the sun at 304 angstroms. See some filaments on the northeast. Otherwise, not a lot going on. Talk about a blank solar disk. Let's look at another view. 193 angstroms. And indeed, the amount of solar activity is exceedingly low. A couple small disorganized coronal holes there around the south and the north, but not a lot else going on. Definitely no sunspots. Last we checked solar wind, below 1 proton per cubic centimeter. Here are the magnetic field lines in 171 angstroms. And for a change, let's look at the 94 angstroms view. Slow day on the sun. Take a look at the real-time solar wind here. Let's see. BT/BZ is very convergent on the 0 line. Earth to sun magnetic connection there, no sun to Earth. Almost at the 360 degree mark on the phi angle. And solar wind density is jumping around a bit, but most recently the signal has been less than 1. So I'm going to say 0.6 protons per cubic centimeter. And the speed is down to about, looks like about 370 there. 400 kilometers per second for the solar wind. Heading to spaceweathernews.com. X-ray flux is still flatlined. There's some missing data in there also. Magnetometer is about to receive a spike, and we'll show you why. In the next 24 hours, there will be a spike in the magnetometer, and it will be significant. KP index down to 1. Cygnets forecast. Let that play through. It's through the 16th of January, by the way. And I would again have everybody note the curled magnetotail, totally normal thing, causing disconnection and reconnection in the magnetosphere. Electron flux is leveling off. We wouldn't be surprised if that went up above 10 to the 5th today. We'll keep an eye on it. Charging hazards are pretty much non-existent right now, and the F2 layer is looking pretty normal as per the last few weeks. Aurora forecasts are weak as expected with the solar wind speed and density so low. Moving on. Let's switch gears to the last 24 hours of earthquakes. There's been a bunch going off in Alaska, thanks commenter. 4.8 in Indonesia. 4.4 in Chile at depth. 2.5 at Volcano, Hawaii. What else? A 543 kilometer depth quake at a 4.8 magnitude at Fiji. 5.4 in Indonesia, 4.7 in Russia. 4.6 at depth in Ecuador and a 4.8 in New Caledonia. More Alaskan quakes. 2.5 in Santa Monica, California. How about that? Dominican Republic, 3.0 at 170 kilometers depth. And seeing some deep quakes in the Atlantic. 5.3 in China. 5.2 in Tonga. Another 4.9 in Fiji at 582.7 kilometers. And a 4.8 at Fiji. Lots of activity going on. Let's just zoom in on one area here. Lots of deep quakes happening. Head to volcanodiscovery.com. Looks like we got a new one here. Kadavar, producing an 8,000-foot altitude ash plume. Also, Ibu in Indonesia with a 6,000-foot ash plume. Dukono, 7,000-foot ash plume. Fuego, ongoing volcanic ash emissions. Revenador, 17,000-foot ash plume. Sabancaya, sporadic puffs of volcanic ash. Planchon Petaroa, continuous ash emissions to 15,000 feet. So some new volcanoes popping up and some volcanoes we had covered going off the list. Let's look at the gong too so we can explain the magnetic situation, assuming it doesn't suddenly change, which it is regularly going to do. Now, right in this area, you can see like a bulge in the field there. Those areas are where more direct magnetic connections will reach the corona. And so assuming that doesn't change in the next 24 hours, that orange line you see going from the Earth to the Sun is going to jump over that, and we will see a spike in the magnetometer. Consider that a forecast. Here are your geospace magnetic perturbations from the perspective of the poles. Not a lot going on. You do see a spike headed down the Pacific from Alaska, and one up from Antarctica toward Australia. But those are pretty weak pulses. And here's your global view of the same. Nothing too anomalous appears to be occurring at the current moment. Next, let's look at geospace magnetosphere movies. Here's your velocity. Equatorial plane on the left, meridional plane on the right. You got some low density areas there. And it looks like some incoming wind is what caused the loss of data. See this thing puff up toward the end. Right there. It's going to pop. Interesting. Not showing up on the solar wind data. Let's look at density. Would expect to see an increase in density here. Let's see what this shows us, if anything. Let's go back to that. Looked like a lower density portion of the solar wind came through. Wow, that was a low density spike. Let's watch that again. Remember, the white is low density. Let's watch that again. Yeah, that's not a spike, people. That's the solar wind going down to 0.6 protons per cubic centimeter. That's a weakening of the solar wind. And then headed back to a more normal level. And let's look at the pressure. There you go, an extremely weak solar wind, causing much of the measurable portion of the magnetosphere to vanish off the scope. Let that play through again. Density just drops off, and hence the pressure just drops off. And then comes back right at the end. Let's just look at the pressure one more time. Keep in mind that's a lack of pressure, not a high pressure. I'm sorry, density. That's a lack of density, not a high density. Here it comes. Solar wind density just drops down to practically nothing, and then resumes to a more normal plasma speed. Plasma speed, density, and pressure. Next, let's look at the stock market for a quick minute. The Dow Jones had a very volatile week. There's the Dow 1-year chart. Let's bring up the 1-month chart. So it is actually up on the year now, recovering from some of the losses that were sustained. However, that's no indication that the economy is in good shape overall. Remember, the economy is not just the stock market. The economy is the flow of all goods, services, and currencies around the world. Now, we see bond yields are down, indicating buying in the bond market. Oil is now at $51.70, gold at $1287.9, and silver at $15.64. Wheat was up $6 in the past day. Dollar not doing too bad against other stuff. And we see the euro is down 0.3 of a cent. Now, on that news, let's look at cryptocurrency. Here's Bitcoin, the 1-month chart. We do see some activity going on here, and it's well off of its December 13th lows. It's up 6.92% on the 1-month chart. And here's the 1-month chart of Ethereum. Very similar. A lot of the cryptocurrency seems to follow each other. So there is some activity in the crypto market, and we're going to give you some insight here that you may not have otherwise heard. So everybody's heard of what's going on in France, I'm sure, by now. Yellow vest demonstrators starting fires in the streets, riots, demonstrations, whatever you want to call them. Well, they're calling for added violence this weekend, and they're calling for citizens to withdraw all money from banks and invest in cryptocurrency in order to weaken the European Central Bank and damage the value of the euro. Links to the article in the description. And let's just peruse the titles here on phys.org. We got electricity producing bacteria. We got Elon Musk showing off the prototype of Mars-bound rocket Starship. Steam-propelled spacecraft. All right, let's actually look at some articles here. Stop screwing around. Sugar's 6 secrets. Check it out. How industry forces have manipulated science to downplay the harm. Stay off of sugar, people. It causes massive inflammation. Inflammation causes practically every other health condition you could imagine. We'll leave links to the article. It's all about cooking the books. Similar to climate science, really. Also, China broadcasts some spacecraft pictures from the moon's far side. That's from the orbiter, showing the lander and the rover. Links to that article also. And finally, here's your view of the sun at 171 angstroms. I would note filamentary activity up here. But not a lot else going on. So remember, when you're accurately predicting the sun's magnetic influence on the Earth, don't drink. And if you drink, accurately predict the sun's magnetic influence on the Earth anyway. And don't drive.